Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is another US state type reaction. It's not the same sort of one I'd usually do, and this might be a controversial type video I react to, but I think it could be quite fun. I mean, again, the last video I just did is something that's probably very unlikely to happen, or it is, the last one especially, very unlikely to happen, but I've done a lot of videos on US states, and from what I've seen, the cultures through different states are so different, which is something I didn't actually previously realise whatsoever before I sort of like started getting into these sort of reactions. But the more you learn, right? But yeah, it's just surprised me so far, like the differences between states. And I'm just interested. Yeah, I can't talk. Interested in learn. I can't say the word. Interested in learning more about the US and US states, and just ideas that may not actually happen, but just fun to learn about, I guess you could say. And the video is what if every US state became independent by general knowledge. I think this channel has been suggested a lot as well. So for those who have suggested it, hopefully you're going to enjoy. But yeah, just a fun little reaction. I mean, it's not again, it's probably not ever going to happen, but it's the idea and just the sort of concept of it happening that's quite fun to learn about. But let's just get into this because I am intrigued to see what sort of way this video is going to go, whether he's going to like say there's going to be a war, because I swear there's been talk, some people saying that the US is close to civil war. I don't know if that's close or not, and maybe it's just one of those things that the media sort of exaggerates, but I've just seen it sort of mentioned here and there a bit more recently because of everything that's going on in the world. But let's just check this out. I want to see what this video really mentions, and yeah, let's just get into this, man. Also, quick shout to my Instagram, my YouTube, my second channel on YouTube, and my Twitter. All links in the description. If you're interested in them, click the links and you can get to them easily.
At how big the US actually are.
This is a quiet one, so I'll turn this up a little bit.
At least I do. And how large and powerful.
Sorry for the scuff
Sometimes
start.
we forget how big the US actually are. At least I do. And how large and powerful some of its states can be. Many of the states are economically powerful enough to surpass certain countries in the world, or
It's
they
true,
would
man.
be. So let's take a look at what would be the reality if each
power
US
is actually
state
scary.
became independent and its own country.
The power of the US is actually scary. The more I've seen this, it's just ridiculous how a country can have so much money, so much power, like such a high, maybe not high population because the population is higher, but just in every area they just seem to like have the power and the dominance of the whole world.
Now, we're going to assume that this would be viable, forget the issues of military amongst other obstacles that would effectively make this impossible to ever happen. We're also not going to take into account the fact that the US dissolving itself would not necessarily mean 50 new countries.
True.
Some others might unite into smaller unions, some could join neighboring countries like Canada or Mexico, but not for the sake of this video. What I'm going to be doing is just looking at the data of states.
Also,
and
for the
project
people
how-
asking, because of the camera position, I think people asked last video. The last video actually didn't have Hawaii and Alaska, but where my camera is, let me just move it quickly. I'm gonna have to move it back, but just so you can see. You can see they're there, like Hawaii and Alaska. Apologies for that. I am gonna have to get my green screen sorted again because it makes videos a lot easier to do. But yeah, we'll have to get into that another time. But yeah, just for those who worried last time, they're just sitting
how
there.
they would do as a country when compared to each other and the rest of the world. First, population. California comes at the top with 39 million,
That's unreal.
surpassing current countries like Poland or Canada, around the 33rd most populous country in the world. Texas is second with 28 million, Florida with 20, New York with 19, and Pennsylvania with 12. At the bottom of the population chart, we would have Alaska
Yeah.
with 740,000, Vermont with 620, and Wyoming with 580,000,
God
with
damn.
less population than countries like Cyprus, Comoros, or Bhutan. Next, size.
The
Alaska would be
smallest
the
states
biggest
have over 500,000. That is insane.
country out of the Union, becoming the 18th largest country in the world, smaller than Libya but larger than Iran. Texas and California would follow as the second and third largest countries out of the US. At the bottom of this list would be Rhode Island, Delaware, and Connecticut. Delaware is so small that it's about the size of less than 1/5 of Estonia, And
Jeez.
Rhode Island is
actually
smaller
very
than the
small.
French island of Corsica. Also noteworthy
Oh, wow.
that states like New York or Florida, who are prominent in the other rankings we'll see next, aren't that
Wait.
smaller than the French island and Connecticut. Delaware is so small that it's about the size of less than 1/5 of Estonia, and Rhode Island is smaller than the French
That's
island
crazy.
of Corsica.
It's crazy how there's so many states that are just huge, and then there's these smaller states, like these tiny, tiny states. And it's just something that interests me even more about like the US as a country, like why that's the case. Obviously, it's gonna have its reasons why, but like you've got like Texas and Alaska, which are just huge, and then you've got these states that are so small. But it's just interesting for me to see this sort of stuff.
Also
I
noteworthy
really enjoy learning
that
about this
states
stuff.
like New York or Florida, who are prominent in the other rankings we'll see next, aren't that big, occupying the 27th and 22nd places respectively. Florida, for instance, is only a little larger than Portugal, and New York is close to the size of Belarus, showing us that size doesn't necessarily mean more economic power. In economic terms, California would be ranking number 1. It's by far the most productive state and even self-sufficient in some aspects. And it would become the world's 5th largest economy, only behind China, Japan, Germany, and the UK.
That is
Texas wouldn't be
crazy.
that far behind though, also in second place as the world's 10th largest economy
That is
between
insane,
Brazil
man.
and Canada. The current economic might of the US is demonstrated by the fact that in an event like this, 4 states would be in the G20: California, Texas, New York,
Wow.
and Florida, kicking out Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and South Africa, as well as the US. This economic reality is demonstrated by the GDP of each state, or
Wait, as well as the US itself. So them 4 states have more than the rest of the US states together. That's kind of crazy.
new
man.
country in this case.
That is crazy.
California
That's
would be at the
ridiculous.
top again, with a GDP of $2.7 billion. Texas with $1.7 billion, New York with $1.5, and Florida with $970 million. It seems as if, in the case of independence, these 4 would be at the top of almost all rankings amongst the old states. However, if we look at the GDP in another perspective, the GDP per capita, Massachusetts would have the highest one, ranking number 9 in the world,
Wow.
just behind the United Arab Emirates. The District of Columbia would technically be higher, but since it isn't an official state, I guess it would just be absorbed into Virginia in this scenario. This map is really interesting. It's a bit outdated from 20.
Yo, this is a really interesting map. So the ones you can see all of them, can't you? This is insane. Now this is a map that I'm looking for, man. This is crazy, and this is all in one country. Oh, mate, I don't know why it makes me laugh. It's just ridiculous. The power is absolutely insane to me. That is insane, man. God damn.
2013, but it shows the equivalent GDP of each state to a current existing country, matching North Dakota with Uzbekistan, New Mexico with Ecuador, Connecticut to Greece, or Alaska to Luxembourg. But values have changed since then, and even these ones are a rough approximation. The end of the US would also mean that a lot of the
I'm
states
interested in
would
the
have
flags
to change
as
their
well.
state flags, most of which have something to do with the Union. Most state flags are just the state seal, and usually the seal has a lot of elements of the US, like the eagle, the order of admission into the Union, or sometimes the actual US flag, so a change would definitely be in order for those. States like Ohio would probably want something that is more about their own identity. For instance, each state has an official bird, tree, and flower, so these could be put into use. On Ohio's case, the Buckeye tree or the cardinal bird could be symbols on a new flag. I guess that in this case, states like California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, New Jersey, or Maryland would have their problem solved having already original flags. In the case of California or Texas, these are even flags that already represented the territories at a
These are some crazy cool flags. I like these a lot. I've seen the Texas one. I think the Texas one is probably the most familiar flag for a state to me. I saw the California one very recently. I don't know where. I think it's probably to do like Joe Rogan podcast or something. But the other ones I've never seen. So this is all very new to me. Very, very new to
the
me.
time of independence, so it would make even more sense to maintain them. Religion would also be an interesting topic. 14 of these new countries would be of Catholic majority, 33 would be Protestant, and 3 would be Mormon. Utah and Idaho creating the only 3 countries in the world who have a Mormon majority,
Wow.
along with Tonga, a small Pacific island. It's also interesting to see something else. Given that despite these differences, all states maintain a Christian majority, what would be the second largest religion in each of these new countries? The West Coast, Alaska, Hawaii, and some of the Midwest have Buddhism as their second largest religion.
Wow.
The Northeast, Judaism, and a lot of the South and Center states have Islam.
So you can just see the difference in cultures and like religions in these kinds of maps itself. Like it's sort of like split in certain ways. Man,
Southern states
love
are the
learning this
most
sort of
religious,
stuff.
at least
I
in
really
terms
do.
of attendance, so we could assume that religion would play a larger role in these future countries. States like Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire are on the opposite end, with lower church attendance and perhaps less importance of religion for the population. Assuming that military issues would not be a problem, and that the military power of the US would simply be divided among states according to the nature of each soldier, Texas would have the largest military, with a total of 292,000 troops.
wow.
California would follow with a total of 247,000. And keep in mind that this data isn't really certain and might be outdated. With this data, Texas would be the 20th strongest military force in the world, above
Oh,
Canada,
mate.
and California would follow right behind. However, this is just about soldiers. The question would be put of how to divide other military supplies and vehicles, like tanks, the US Navy, the Air Force. In my opinion, military unity is what makes a US breakup most unlikely. The fact that they would abdicate being the world's strongest military force, and the mere confusion and mess that it would be dealing with the post-Union military force. We can also take a look at some other interesting statistics that show us current differences between states that would transfer into differences
seeing
between
this
the
as
new
well.
countries. For instance, the legalization of marijuana, legal on all of the West Coast for recreational use, for medical use in a bunch of other states, but illegal in some others. And remember that this is before the 2018 midterm election. In terms of
Okay, and
crime rate,
people said recently there's been a lot of changes to that, so like 5 more states have legalized it, something like that.
should the current stats be maintained, Vermont, Maine, and Minnesota would be the safest of the 50 countries. New Mexico, Alaska, Louisiana, and Arkansas would be the top 4 most dangerous countries.
Oh wow.
The states with the
Alaska, that's a surprise. I mean, the other ones I'm not too sure because I don't know much about those states, but Alaska's a surprise. I would have thought like that would be one of the safe ones just because the weather is so like ridiculously cold. People just wouldn't even bother to do things that make it unsafe. But the more you know,
highest
right?
percentage of poor people could likely be in the south, while the ones with the least percentage of people in poverty would be in the northeast. Some countries would have a male population majority, like Hawaii, North Dakota, or Wyoming, and others would have a female majority, like Delaware, Alabama, Mississippi, or Maryland, amongst many other stats. The thing is, all of these statistics, despite being about specific states, are collected in the context of the Union. Should the US dissolve, all of them would probably change because the way the states are is dependent or at least related to their coexistence within the same nation. For instance, California's economic might maybe would be reduced if it instantly saw its neighbors as new countries and not member states of the same union, because new trade agreements would need to be drafted, etc. And new necessities would emerge. For instance, the need of each new country to have their own military, meaning expenses in that respect. Amongst so many other changes that would maybe change the power relation that now exists between states. However, I think we can draw a few conclusions from all this. In the event of every state becoming independent, 4 of them would instantly become powerful countries in the world. California,
Crazy, man.
Texas, New York, and Florida. They top
Crazy.
the most significant criteria: population and economic power. However, others might also be at the top of successful countries which would emerge. Massachusetts has a solid public education and good local government using a somewhat European model in Texas, so they might be able to make it work. Other smaller states might have a more difficult time and lose a lot of their wealth as consequence of the central government not being around anymore. Maybe new unions would emerge, and we can only really try and guess what would happen. If you enjoy this one, remember to subscribe to catch new ones and leave a comment below with your opinion. I will
Shout out to this guy, man. This could be another fun video I could do in future. Interesting in historical maps you should see. I mean, already this looks crazy. I mean, obviously this is just to get people to watch the video, but that's a funny little looking map. But yeah, I love these kinds of videos. Again, the ideas are so out there and they're so unlikely to happen, but still, it's just interesting to see these kinds of videos, man. Honestly, sometimes we forget how big and powerful some of these states actually are. Zooms into Idaho. Rest of the Union, we got we have U46 to 4, Texas, California, New York, Florida. I like those odds. The safest states would be Minnesota. Boy, that did not age well. Oh, okay. What if every state became independent? That Animaniacs song would be way longer. Basically, this video is about California, Texas. It was mainly, but I didn't realize. Well, I obviously knew Texas and California were like two like huge states and like powerful in terms of population and their economy, but I didn't expect them to be so sort of dominant. And New York, I thought they'd like be sort of a bit. I mean, they were still very, very dominant. But for some reason, I thought New York would be the most powerful state. I don't know why. I just sort of view New York, the city, because of how much money that city makes. I don't know if between like New York, the city, and LA, like which is the more sort of powerful city in terms of GDP. I assume California because of this because of the fact that like California itself has more like a bigger bigger economy. But in saying that, I feel like California has a lot more big cities in the state compared to New York. So maybe that's the case with that, and New York's obviously a lot smaller as a state compared to California. But fun little video, man. I really just find these things so intriguing. USA breaks up South Carolina and other southern states, Confederate time. The video is about 50 independent states, only talks about 4. Short answer, each state would be over $500 billion in debt. What if all these states became independent? Texas being there, done that. When you came to see your state, but your state isn't mentioned at all. But I did enjoy this, man. Fun video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Suggest some more things like this in future. I see the video in the suggested, what if America actually buys Greenland? What's this about? I keep seeing this sort of mentioned in videos here and there, and I'm kind of just intrigued about what it's about. So I mean, if you guys want me to react to that, let me know in the comments, because I do enjoy those kinds of reactions. But yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, peace.